My name is Lucious, L-U-C-I-O-U-S, not the L-U-C-I-U-S, Edwards Jr., and I am from Virginia. I'm from Chesterfield, Virginia. I was born in a little town called Ettrick, which is where Virginia State University is located. And that's who I am right there.
What was your vocation?
I was a historian and an archivist at Virginia State for 35 years. That's what I was.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Could you please tell me a little bit about your family history?
Yeah, my family history, my oldest daughter, which has surprised me, she's become the family genealogist. So far, she has taken my father's side of the family back to about 1740 in North Carolina. And we're working on my mother's history, and we haven't gotten that back very far, probably to about 1870 or so, after the Civil War. But my oldest daughter she's a science teacher and always hated history, and I was surprised that she has really gotten into genealogy because I'm not. And so, but 1740, it's very cute. Down in North Carolina, in Chatham, North Carolina. We come from a young lady who was found wrapped in a blanket, probably had been born a few hours before, and took her to the big house and they named her Found. So she is, yes, I mean, I'm not making this up. And now we're getting ready to meet some of our other relatives named Glovers and Foxes, people we've never heard of before. So that's what we're doing right now, and it's just interesting, but I'm really not, I haven't put as much time on it that I should have put on it myself, but she's taking up the charge. She's doing it.
Well, tell me about your parents. What do you recall of your parents or your grandparents?
Well, my grandparents, not so much, but my parents, my mother is from Chesterfield, and we believe she probably has been in that area perhaps since the late 1600s or early 1700s, but we're not sure about that yet. My father's people, as I said, he was they originally from Chatham County, a place called Silas City. If you've ever listened to Andy Griffin, they talk about with Mayberry and everything, they talk about the place, they call it Siler, but it's Silas City. And my father's people are from there, and my grandmother's people, they were Thorpes. They were from Rocky Mount, North Carolina, in that area in there. And my father was orphaned at a very early age. And they moved to Petersburg. His three sisters, he was the youngest, and they were the oldest. After their mother died from City Point, they walked up to Petersburg, and the oldest aunt took care of them by stemming tobacco in Petersburg for $1 a day, and she reared them. And when my father was about 12 or 13 years old, they moved to someplace else to chop peanuts, as they said. And my father stayed. He stayed because some of the people there thought he was a good worker and everything. He ended up marrying one of the young ladies in that group. So my father stayed where my mother was, and he stayed in Chesterfield County all of his life, where my mother was from. And then I can't say anything else about that. But they were farmers. They weren't farmers, they were workers. My father worked for the railroad. My mother stayed at home. You know, she was the only sister in the family that did not work. She had a washing machine and all these kinds of things because he worked for the railroad. And the railroad paid regularly, and he had insurance and he had benefits. And I was coming up this morning, and we stopped right outside of Washington, and the lady said, we're gonna switch trains, and that brought back a memory, because when I was growing up, we would ride the trains, because my father worked for the railroad, and I thought it was fascinating when we came to DC, they changed engines, and I thought that was fascinating. That was a nice little moment for me, to be honest with you, so I'm thinking about that. But they were, I grew up in Ettrick, Virginia, a very small black community. Walking distance to Virginia State University. I ended up going to the laboratory school on the campus, and I also ended up getting a bachelor's and a master's degree from there. I had not planned that, but that's what I ended up doing. And I never experienced some things that some other people experienced. We had the benefit of people with degrees, and we weren't surprised to know that someone had a PhD in something, and we had a band and all this kind of stuff in elementary school, which was not very common at that time in anybody's school, not just black, but anybody's school. But we had, the lab school dealt with practice teachers. And so we had a band for the practice teachers to practice on. So we had a band and everything else. And I still think, and I think my fellow students, we still think that was the best school we ever been to. And that was the elementary school. And I'm not kidding.
You said that you weren't particularly interested, early on, but your oldest daughter has started doing some digging. And even in the midst of this short conversation, it occurs to me that you seem to have a positive impact on recounting your family history.
Well, I knew it. I wasn't going to, I used to say to myself, I'll go out there and look and I'll find a bush, instead of a tree. So I didn't bother with it. But she's taken it up. I've sent off a couple of things, ancestry things, and so far what we've got back is my origins might be somewhere in Nigeria, Cameroon. And I spent 2 weeks at a Lorraine University. I was out there doing some work with them. And it was just kind of interesting to me to be around all these Yoruba people who I'm probably related to, if that is the way it goes. So, but she's the one who can do all this stuff with the computers, and I'll be honest with you, I can't.
My last point is directly to you. How does that make you feel?
Well, it makes me feel pretty good, because all my life I thought she hated history, therefore hating me. But it turned out not to be true. I know you. I made all this up right outside that door out there.
That's quite all right. So, with regards to registering and the vote, where do you stand, in your opinion?
Well, coming out of high school, going into college and everything, understand what voting is supposed to do. Theoretically, if you vote, you're a part of the system. You can vote for people who will represent you, and et cetera. But I've always been disappointed with that, because black people, when they could vote, they had a limited choice of people to even vote for. But it's still recognized as the way to move in the system without getting hurt or something like that. I still think that's pretty important. But to me, the most important part about elections is the quality of the people you have to vote for. And that has not been good lately. And so that's a problem. But I understand that theoretically it is supposed to be the utmost privilege in a democracy to vote, because you have a hand in the in the system. And so if we're going to do that, I think it's important that we go ahead and do what we can to get people out there to vote. But at the same time, there are a lot of problems and things going on in this country that are going to require economic changes and everything, and some of those things are running countersync to a lot of what we have done in this country. So it's going to be very interesting in the next 30, 40, 50 years. It's going to be very, very interesting to see, because I'm not sure if it's sustainable. There's a limit to how much oil, coal, gas, asphalt, there's a limit to that kind of stuff. So what are we going to do with that? But it is still a good way. All systems have voting. Native American people voted, Africans voted. So it's not something unique to Europe. But we have not been rewarded, so to speak. Although we've done pretty well, but we have not been rewarded the way I would have thought we should have been.
So in short, we as African American people of color, need to vote consciously with respects to who we have at our disposal to vote for.
To vote for, yeah. And it doesn't matter what color that person is. You have to look at what that person has done and said. That's the important thing. And so far, years and years ago, you didn't really have any kind of choice at all. You could vote for A or B. They were saying the same thing, and neither one of them included anything about you. But that's better. That's better. And I'm looking to see if it's going to be possible for African Americans and Latinos and Native Americans to come together more in coalitions and begin to move like that. And I think you can see some of that fear in the system now, that people are looking at that. First, I think 2040 is supposed to be the first year of a majority minorities. And that's going to be interesting, but that's going to be for you younger guys to deal with.